Hi, it's Bobby from Fit That Venue Cakes, and today I want to talk a little bit about royal icing and what we can do with it and how you can decorate all sorts of different things with royal icing if you have the right consistency. So that's what I'm going to talk about at the moment is the consistencies, and I have 4 cookies to show you what different designs I was able to do. With a line consistency, I was able to do the little lacing and the bow. I was also able to do the outline and the little beautiful eyelet lacing on the side. Also the lacing that you see in this one. With I call it a 15 second, 12 second, anywhere from 12 second to 15 second depending on the area that you live in, how humid it is. You can do a bead consistency which gives you very round beads, which I was able to do the little catchets or lockets for the lace, also to design some lace decorative on these guys, and you could do some fill-in, which I did under here. As you can see, this is of a top coat consistency, which is about 15 seconds. And then if you go to an off-peak consistency, you can do a ruffle border, you can do a rope border. There are so many things you can do with the off-peak consistency. So knowing the consistencies and the type of tips that you might need is the only knowledge that you need to have in your arsenal to create an abundance of different cookies, cakes, and cupcakes. So let me show you how we make these consistencies. Well, welcome back. So let's work with a little bit of royal icing. I have already created my royal icing, and I had show how in some earlier posts if you want to look at that and give the recipe. At the moment, I'm just going to show you a little bit of stiff consistency, and then I'm going to take it down to a line consistency, and from there I'll take it to your 15 second, which I use for top coating as well as bead consistency. And I will explain a 10-second consistency, which would be like a wet on wet. It's always important to keep your royal icing in an airtight container, so I'm releasing the air from my container. I like to pad out my royal icing. Even though I beat it on the lowest speed possible, there can always be air bubbles. So with a regular, I think this is a Rachel Ray spatula that has never touched any fat ever. I keep all of my egg white utensils separate from my fat utensils. I'm just patting out my royal icing. And then we will be using a spray bottle to bring it to a line consistency. But right now I'm going to show you a thick consistency. Alright, so this is your off-peak consistency, and I'm trying to keep it all centered on this little pad. But the way you know it's off-peak is I'm going to lift it up. It's giving me tension, and the peak is just staying and bent slightly. So that's an off-peak consistency, and I will show you that in a tip in one moment. I'm going to take this consistency to a line consistency. I find the best way is to use a spray bottle with cool boiled water that I then put in the refrigerator for a good hour. Royal icing would rather have cold water than hot. I'm going to gently mist that little bit because it is such a little bit that I'm not sure how much I'll need to get it to a line consistency. So again, I'm going to pat it down. And this is more of a medium consistency by now. If I raise this up, let me get it together for you. If I raise this up, it will bend over a little bit more, but it's not quite line consistency. It would get clogged in a 1.5 to a 00 tip, which is not what you want, and your line would break. With a line consistency, you want to go to a soft peak consistency. The medium consistency would work best with pansies, with some of your ropes Not all of them. I tend to like the off-peak consistencies. Okay, so we're still at a medium. I'm going to mist again with just a very little bit. You can always add more, but you can't take away. And I don't think we're quite at a soft peak consistency. You're looking for your royal icing to get a little bit shinier and to fall over, as Mark Seaman says in his Craftsy video, like a Dairy Queen ice cream cone. So we're looking for it to lift up and make that pretty curly cube. And we don't have that quite yet. We're almost there. And I want to go slowly because the last thing I want to do is make a run out consistency for you. And I'm patting it so that I take out all those air bubbles rather than doing it in a bowl where I would be whipping it and adding air to it. We want to make sure the royal icing has the least amount of air that we can, especially since there are egg whites in here. And that's not quite there. Once you do this a few times, you'll know by looking at it. But I'm going to teach you some tricks till you get used to the royal icing. I think we're pretty much there. I can feel that my royal icing is loosening up, and it's giving me more of a line consistency. And this would be for any work that you want to do with a 1.5 tip and down, and also for any of your line work, for outlining, for offset S scrolls that are very small. But as you can see, when I lift it up, it's going to curl over. That's exactly what we want. That is a line consistency. It stays separated. It's still thick enough that it hasn't turned into a 15-second consistency. And that's what we want. So when I talk about line consistency, I'm talking about a soft peak. It's almost the consistency of thick toothpaste. As you can see, it wouldn't hold a rose if I piped it, but it would definitely string a line. And now we're going to take this to a 15-second consistency. So I'm going to spray it just a tad more. And I'm working on my PME board. I find that's the easiest board for me to work on. You don't want to fill whatever type of bag you're working with, and I'm sure you already know that I am partial to cornet cones, either fitted with a tip or by itself, depending on what I'm doing. Alright, so you want to add just a few more, a spritz of water, or you can do droplets. This is just easier for me. Alright, I'm going to make this into a little mound, and then from that mound, I'm going to put a dab in there and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And by 12 you can see that it has completely gone in. That's a 12-second consistency. A 10-second consistency would take 10 seconds, and 15 seconds would take 15 seconds. Since I'm in Colorado, I'll do anywhere from a 12 to a 15, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this because it's at 12. I'm going to grab my little tiny spatula that we do carry in the shop if you ever need one. This is a great little tool. And get all my royal icing up. Whenever I'm working with the consistency that is this runny, I like to use a parchment cone with no tip if I can, just because it's easier to get it in there and make sure that nothing comes out. I'm going to put it all the way to the bottom of my cone. And I'm only going to take up what's in the center. What went off to the side is probably not the consistency that I want. And that is consistencies. So for an off-peak consistency, it would not be thick enough if you wanted to pipe a royal icing rose onto a nail. For that, I would add about a teaspoon of powdered sugar at a time and lightly paddle it in so you don't add any air. But what you could do with an off-peak consistency is a beautiful ruffle, like I had on the bottom of the bachelorette corset, which looks like that. Or you could do a very small rosebud. You would come up with the wide end of your tip down, come over from your right to your left with pressure, release as you get to the other side, come down, do a little bit of cleanup with your brush so that it looks nice, and do the same thing for the left side. And since I'm not doing a class on roses, I just wanted to show you what you can do with an off-peak consistency. So that's your off-peak consistency. With your line consistency, the best way to know if it's going to work out is I would start at one point and come up as high as you possibly can and see how long you can go and how high you can go before that line breaks. That's a pretty good, oh, it's moving. That's a pretty good, let's get him centered so you can see. That's a pretty good consistency. I could take him all the way around a cookie, or if I was doing something with a cake, I could do that with that one. So let's show it on a cookie and see how that works out. Now when I'm working with a line consistency royal icing, I don't want my bag filled too high because it would be too hard for me to push through this #1 PME tip. And sometimes I'm even working with a smaller tip, like a 0. But if you can see, my line is going around my cookie and coming down at the points that I want to exaggerate, but I'm not breaking my line. I'm going to kind of gently come down here so that I have a little bit of definition on that part of this particular cookie and here as well. I did break a little, but we'll be fine. I just was able to reconnect it. If you keep constant pressure, that should not be a problem. And we will go back with the damp brush to fix that. And depending on what you're doing, will depend on whether you need to remove it or you can just let it be. And I am letting gravity guide my line. But this is a really good line consistency. It's not too wet. It's not too dry. It allows me to go around this cookie as long as I keep the right amount of pressure. And as long as I don't have too little or too much in my piping bag. And I don't release pressure like I just did. You want to keep your pressure pretty constant until you get to the end. You can do a little bit of stretching if it's not exactly where you want it. I'm coming over my arm, so hopefully I can see what I'm doing to a nice extent. And then what I'm going to do, so that it does not look like it has a great big round dot in there, I'm going to take a lightly dampened brush and do a little bit of housekeeping or cleanup in there. And just fix this a little bit so that they connect and don't look like they don't belong. I'm going to move him up just a smidge because I couldn't see over my arm. Do you like the way I make his pieces there? And he's just a little bit more square than I want, so I'm actually going to remove him and I'm going to show you how to do a little bit of what I call operation. So we can't leave it like that. And I have this cookie covered in fondant, but I'm also going to do a top coating on part of it like you saw in the other cookie. So I'm going to come in just where I didn't like that line I'm keeping my tips on a PME holder that has a little sponge, but if you had a dampened paper towel or a dampened wash rag, that would probably work just as well. This is what I keep my tips on, and I love it, and we do carry it. Alright, so we have the outline on for our cookie. And the next thing that you can do is figure out where you want to put that top coating, like I did in that one cookie. And what I like to do, and it doesn't matter if you have a royal icing cookie or a fondant cookie, and I do want to mention that if I was doing a completely royal icing cookie on this, I would top coat the whole thing and still go back with a number 1 tip just to make a fine outline. But if I wanted to outline and fill in, which would be a little bit different, then I would come in with a number 3 tip. I'm just lightly scratching so that I end up even where I want this outline to be. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at my point here and my point here, and then I'm deciding I'm probably going to come in from right about here, and I can change that because you're not going to be able to tell. And I'm going to want it to curve a little to here, and then to here, and then down to here. And then I'm going to want this the same amount over here. And that's pretty much why I want to scratch it. You could do it with royal icing, and you can do it with your dried fondant. I wouldn't do it with wet royal icing. You'd want that royal icing to sit out overnight. With fondant, you'd want at least 4 hours, depending on your fondant. So I just want to make sure I'm pretty even on what I'm doing here. And like I said, I'm just making light scratches, so if I need to change, I can. And then I'm just going to come in about right here on this side. And with my line consistency, I'm going to bring this up, and because I want it to curve, I'm going to slightly angle my tip, come to this point. I'm going to make a little divot so that it follows the same line as the outline. Same thing here. And bring it down to the bottom. Hopefully without breaking. Since I did break, I'm going to turn it to give me a little bit more contact. And bring it to right here. I'm going to release pressure as I come to this line. And then I'm just going to do a little bit of tidying up here. Not too much because I'm going to be filling that in. So it almost looks like a glass if you look at the little outline I did. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to turn my cookie slightly. I'm going to come in from right about here, and I made too big of a dot. No biggie. I'm going to grab my little scribing tool, and I have 2 different scriber tools, which you'll see in a minute. I'm going to repeat exactly what I did on the other side, slightly turning my tip so that it curves. Come in, make contact. And when I say make contact, I'm just gently lowering that tip, not releasing pressure, but lessening on my pressure. And then I will release complete pressure when I come to right about here. I can see that it is not exactly the same as the other side. There'll always be a side that's a little bit easier for you. So I'm just going to fix it with a dampened brush. And nobody will ever know once I get in my 12-second filling consistency. If you're in a more humid climate, I would go to a 15-second consistency. So I've got that on pretty well. And I'm going to take my 12-second consistency. I've kept it in a plastic bag so that it would not change on me. And I did not cut off the tip. I'm just going to check it, make sure it gives me a good consistency with a good flow.